So my name is Radhika Mutana. I graduated from Nottingham Trent in 2020. I studied sociology, and then I realised that I had a talent for photography. I'm quite a creative person, and I wanted to combine sociology with photography, and that's what most of my work is now. So now I do freelance photography, focusing on identity and culture. So the exhibition consists of 4 photographs that represent South Asia and Southeast Asia. The whole idea behind it is based off when my parents first moved into this country, and traditional clothing was really important to them. But because we were in an area that was predominantly white, or because of the racial abuse as well, I would always tell my parents, don't wear them, and felt really guilty for it now, looking back. So that's what this whole project stems from, is to make people aware that traditional clothing isn't something to be ashamed of. It's part of your culture and you should be proud of it. Because then I think when you grow older, you do have a disassociation to your culture, which is what I hope this exhibition can tackle, because it's important to people feel comfortable in their own skin, whether that be if they wear like a bindi, henna, literally anything. People should be able to just wear whatever they want rather than thinking about what other people are going to think of them. And especially because England is such a versatile place, your outfits are what make you, your clothing is what makes you. So that's why I think this is important to me. And also, one of the photos is of my mum as well, and I got her to wear her sari, and I know she just felt so like empowered and beautiful in it. So yeah, that was the reason for this whole exhibition. I want them to see the beauty that there is in traditional clothing. I feel like there's always so much negative connotations attached. For example, like a bindi gets told is like, oh, a red dot, and it's like, it's so much more than that. Or like a sari, or anything. There's so much beauty in it that I want people to take away from and realise that this is someone's culture, and it's a very, very beautiful part of someone's culture. Since I started photography, I've met so many like-minded individuals. I'm Indian, so I've met so many other models, photographers, musicians who are Indian, and hearing their stories is so nice to be able to relate to their experiences. And that's one of the things that I think this exhibition I want to portray as well. I want people to view my work and be like, oh, I can relate to that, and just sort of, yeah, like use that as a way to feel empowered. I'm working on a project on black hairstyles. So it's an ongoing project with black women and having their hair in as creative as they can want to go, and just showcasing that I'm working with a magazine, and showcasing the beauty of it. And I'm really excited because I've reached out to quite a few women, and they're all stunning and they're so excited for this project. So yeah, that's one of the projects I'm working on.
So my name is Tolu Oshodi, and I am an artist. I'm originally of Nigerian heritage, but I grew up in London. I come from a background of dance, and I moved into visual art when I was studying psychology at university, and my practice is between like movement, photography, and moving image. So the work I have in the exhibition is called Soft Life, and I actually took that name from like this, what do I even call it? But it's kind of like a popular culture thing that's happening at the moment, and specifically amongst black women. And it's just this idea of us wanting a softer life for ourselves, because throughout time we've always been given a lot of labels like, you know, strong black women. It's great to be strong, but when someone always calls you strong, it's as though there's no space within that to be vulnerable or weak or soft. So I wanted to just take some portraits of some black women that I know, specifically darker skinned black women, and just allowing them to be vulnerable and happy and soft and taking up space. I think it's important for these kind of stories to be told, because the wrong kind of stories have been told by other people about us and the people in question for a long time. So it's important for us to tell our own stories ourselves. And I think it's always good for artists and people who maybe don't consider themselves artists to be put in a position of like celebration. So I think it's really nice to celebrate that. And I think anyone can take anyone can take anything from, looking at these portraits, but what I think is important to take is just, that idea of representation and the right kind of representation by the right people. So the representation of black women by a black woman telling that story. I think, because the exhibition is called, Reclaiming the Narrative. So I think it speaks more to people who maybe, when I say speaks more, so people who aren't people of colour, if they're watching, or not watching, but they're viewing the exhibition, just to maybe consider where they stand in these narratives, and if maybe in the past they might have, perpetrated some of like the more negative narratives that we artists are trying to flip, or, just bring our perspective. So I think anyone who's viewing it who maybe necessarily isn't a person of colour, they can just take it as like a learning experience, as well as, just taking in artwork and the beautiful work that everyone has created. And for us people of colour, just like appreciating everyone's stories, because there are always links. I think when you are a person of colour, you can always relate to someone else's experience culturally. So for me, that's what I'd say. I'd like people to also take from the exhibition. After this exhibition, I'll be working on a performance piece with a painter. So we started this last summer, and luckily we got some funding from Gerwood Arts to continue it. So that will be in London, and we're just combining our practice. We're working on this collaboration of movement and paint, and that will be on the 19th of March, I believe. We're going to have a little showcase performance, and I'm currently also working on a continuing body of work called Remnants. I just had the screening at our end of year show at Open School East last weekend, and I'm thinking about where I can show the film next, and that would then develop into like a live durational piece.
Hello, my name is Jose Campos, and I work as Studio Lenka. I was born in El Salvador and, like many, had to flee the country. I grew up in the US and eventually found refuge in the UK. I'm an artist and a teacher, and for this exhibition, I've contributed 4 paintings that I've made with local refugee children. There's a collection of 4 paintings. One of them is by me, and then 3 of them are by 3 different boys who have made their way to the UK by themselves. And altogether, they tell the story of immigration. They tell a story of displacement, and they tell a story about the power of painting. It's important for these stories to be told because often they are hidden, and it's important that we sort of subvert hegemonic structures of power, specifically within an art context and cultural institutions. My work is influenced by the need to confront injustices. I also work as a teacher, so the students that I work with influence my practice greatly. I very much see them as part of my practice. So I like to tell stories that are often hidden. So these paintings tell a story, and I would like for the viewers to see that these boys who have painted these works are not defined by their experience as immigrants, that they will grow to be contributors of this society, and it's just an experience that they've had. But with this experience comes superpowers. It's a very powerful life experience. So currently I have a studio in Margate's Old Town. You're welcome to visit me. I have a few different projects, and you can sort of follow along at Studio Lenka on Instagram. But in the near future, I am participating in the Edinburgh Arts Festival in August, and I will also be exhibiting work soon in Beirut.
Hi, I'm Elspeth. Most people call me Billie, Penfold. I'm a walking artist who lives in Tankerton. I explore the connections between walking, weaving, and storytelling. I am from Latin America, born in Bolivia, of Argentine parents. I've enjoyed being in Margate and exploring the connections with Buenos Aires Street in Margate and Buenos Aires because they landed the corned beef here back in the day. So it's a great place for me to start walking and thinking about connections. The work that I'm bringing to the Turner for POW is rewriting the census through Campos. The work began with a comment from two of my sons, I have three, who said to me, "Mum, what do you do when you fill out the census?" And I said, I don't, because the only category it offers me is other. As a Latin American, we are not included in the census. And when the call out came from POW, I thought that this was a great opportunity to bring this to light, that there are 250,000 Latin Americans in London. It's the fastest growing ethnic group in London at the moment, and there is no recognition of the Latin American community. There's only one borough in London that recognises Latin Americans, and that's Southwark, which makes a difference to how you can participate within your community, because when you're not included and you other yourself, you actually become invisible. So this is a piece of work that invites you to come and make some ropes. It derives from the ancient art of the Incas, who were in South America. They had their empire, the Tahuantinsuyo, before the Wars of Independence. They had ropes and knots as a way of recording things of value to their community. So I'm inviting people to come and explore identity, use threads and textiles to create maybe a different language, to explore all the many layers that make us up as people, and to use a sense of touch, run your fingers through the ropes, create the knots, and think about all the things that make you quite special and unique. Moving away from single categories of identity, one box, tick, to the many layers that make us who we are. So I'm working on several projects at the moment. I actually have a walk, also as part of Power for the Fringe, with Margate Bookie. We are walking with Isabel Allende's book, The Soul of a Woman, Mujeres del Alma Mía. It will be a bilingual walk, and again, this will take place from Margate Station next Tuesday, and we're really looking forward to that. There's about 6 of us. There's got music, dancing, and we're sharing a reading of the book to explore all the things that connect us. I'm also doing some work with Gateways to Kent, with the Imperial War Museum, on the legacy of war, which is quite poignant given what's happening at the moment. And I'm also going to be doing some work with Citizen to do with a walk in Whitstable, which explores clay and copper bass, which I'm finding out a lot about. It's used as a fixative for textiles. And that's going to be quite an interesting piece.
My name is Roya Rahmanzadeh. I'm a painter from Medway. I live in Rochester. I was born in Chatham. I spent 12 years in London and I moved back to Kent last year. I have been painting and drawing since I can remember. In my family there's some professional artists. My uncle is Saeed Adilakpur, sculptor, and my auntie is a painter, Akram Rahmanzadeh. And when I was little, they were art students and they were around a lot, and I spent a lot of time with them learning to paint and draw. So it's been a big part of my communication style for as long as I can remember. It's a big part of how I make sense of the world and express myself. One of my earliest memories is sitting at the kitchen table with my uncle. He'd set up a fruit bowl, so like a still life. There was some apples, bananas, oranges, and we were sitting opposite each other, drawing the same fruit bowl. And we did it for ages, like concentrated for ages, and then we looked at each other's drawings, and his drawing was different to mine because he'd been opposite me, and the fruit was in a different arrangement. And that moment, I realised that he could see the fruit bowl as well, because he was like me. So he had thoughts and feelings like me, and I hadn't realised that before. That was like the moment that I realised that I wasn't the only person experiencing the universe. Everyone else is experiencing it as well. And ever since then, the way that I draw and paint is the way that I communicate how I'm experiencing the universe, and the way that I make sense of my experience of the world. So I am showing 3 pieces of work in the show, Reclaim the Narrative at the Turner, as part of the Power of Women Festival. The first piece that I'm showing I did in 2015, so quite a long time ago, and it was a time in my life that was quite sad, quite depressed, quite lonely. I was working on a pub in Holloway Road, so I was like working really late, and I come home to this shared house and it was freezing, like the heating didn't work, there was like mice and rats. It was just grim, and I think that like at one point there was about 15 people living in this house. And when I wasn't in this house or working at the pub, I was volunteering at the migrant centre, Haringey Migrant Support Centre in Tottenham, and I was volunteering there a lot, like whenever I could be there, I'd be there. And the clients there like kind of changed with the political landscape. So at that point, I mean, I was there for 5 years, but at that point, I was working with a lot of mums and babies who had no recourse to public funds. They were destitute, and they were dealing with awful, harsh realities. But I'd be accompanying them to like social work visits, helping them like talk to authorities. So I'd spend a lot of time with them, and I'd see this like connection between the mums and babies, and it really brought something out in me where I began to recognise a very like human need that I wanted a baby. Even though this world is really harsh, even though these people's lives were really harsh, I could see there was something that made them feel more connected to the world than I did, at that point in my life. So that's kind of what that painting's about, basically. It's it's that it was that feeling that I was experiencing at that time. My second painting that's in the show is a natural progression from the first. It has more colour, it's more vibrant, but it's telling the same story. But the third one, which I did this year, is quite different from the other two, and it's because it's the first one I've done since becoming a mother. I had my daughter in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic, and I spent a lockdown with a newborn, which was a really beautiful thing to do, actually. She made me feel just completely connected with her. I felt like we retreated from the world at a time that the world was retreating from each other anyway, and it just made us closer. And when I look at the third painting, I can really see that closeness between the figures in the painting. There's a tenderness there that wasn't in the other paintings, and a peacefulness. I think that as human beings, art is the way that we share our own experiences of the universe, whether that's through a book or a film or a painting. That's how we tell our stories. So I think all stories are important, but the stories in my work and in the other artists in the show is important because with the show's topic, with the show's theme of Reclaim the Narrative, there are stories that never get heard, 150 people died in the last 5 years crossing the channel. The true number is probably much higher than that, and those are stories that we'll never hear. So that's why I think it's really important to hear as many stories as we can, as many different stories as we can. And I quite like to do something with stained glass because my paintings have a lot of iconography in them. I quite like when you go into a cathedral and you look at the stained glass windows, each one is like a complete story. And I think my paintings are a bit like that. Each one is a complete story, and I'd love to have a go at doing that in stained glass one day.
My name's Chandra Manga, and I was born in Mwanza in East Africa, and I moved to London when I was 18 and studied for a degree in graphic design. And then what I did was I went into the commercial world of advertising and did storyboards for TV commercials, and that I did that for quite some time, for about 20 years, and then I reached a point where I wanted to move away from that because it was quite soul destroying. So I went back to my roots as a painter, and I've actually been focusing on that, and I'm involved now with this exhibition, and I absolutely love the new possibilities now, and I'm just going to carry on painting with all the ideas that I've got now. And it's my focus at the moment is with my painting my family and my memories of my family, because they have almost been on pause for 20 years while I was doing the commercial aspect, and I feel like I've lost myself in the time that I've been working, and I think we all lose ourselves to some degree, but my memories of where I'm from, who I am, seem to be completely lost, and I want to kind of just find those roots again. The first painting I in the series was looking after Mohan, and Mohan's my little brother. He was the only one of us that was born actually in the UK. My brother Ramesh is pictured in this painting looking after Mohan, and we all had to take turns because he was very small and my mother was looking after all of us. There was a family of 9 in a very small 2 up, 2 down, so very chaotic, and he wasn't that difficult. It was just we had to be very careful with him. The second painting was a painting of my sister Geeta. She's about 12, 13 years old in that painting. We moved into a council house when I was 15 because of problems that we were having at the time. And I just remember really the happy smile she always used to have. And a few years after that, she had a brain tumor, and she died when she was 17. So this painting just reminds me of how happy she was, and I that's all I remember of her. I don't think of all the dark times because I have all the memories of her smiling. In this painting, the third painting is living at number 24. Now, what I do remember about number 24 was because we just got there, that was the first house that we moved to on that road. I think we did live somewhere else before briefly, but this was the first place where we'd lived for, I think, 2 years. And the way we fitted in with the neighbouring community was very interesting. We did enjoy living there. We enjoyed playing with everyone in the street. But I do remember one conversation with my neighbour, Mrs. Murdoch, and she said one time that, why are you all laughing and playing outside when they're over there fighting for you? And I found this quite strange. What she was talking about was the Falklands War, and I didn't even know what war, whether there was even a war or whatever. So, and it was only later when I found out what that was that I realised what she was saying. But at the time, I just wanted to find out about what that meant. And at the time, I felt that someone was fighting just for us, our family, because I noticed all the other kids in the street, all the other white kids in the street, they were laughing and playing. So I felt at the time that maybe it was just us they were fighting for. What I remember of Mr. and Mrs. Murdoch is it wasn't long before they were really affectionate towards us, because they learnt about our lives and our stories, and we learnt a little about theirs as well. So we did actually in the end get on very, very, very well. Mr. Murdoch became like my second father. He taught me how to build bird boxes and grow things when my dad wasn't around. So we all got together and learned from each other, and I think that was a precious moment in my life looking back. And the fourth painting is Mandira, and that's my painting of my father standing in front of the makeshift temple in the corner of our living room. We always had one of those, well, in the sense that my mum and dad would always set that up, and it was a collection of artifacts from India, and he would encourage us to pray every morning. We'd say a prayer with him. My dad would just sit in his chair all day in front of the Mandira. He was a retired engineer, and he'd had a lot of upsets in his life, but he was happy with just sitting there all day, and I was always fascinated as to how he was so content, and I always felt like I want to feel that level of contentment one day. Well, I think it was his connection with God, and I always struggled with my connection, because my connection to God was always felt like it was through him. So I was actually very upset when there was a house fire and all of the artifacts and everything were burnt in the fire, and now it's been renovated, so there is no sign left that his mandira was even there. So I feel slowly more and more disconnected from him. This is why I did this painting, to actually bring back that memory, and that I can look at it when I feel I need to find home.
Hi, my name is Distin Johnson, and I live in East Kent in Herne Bay. I started painting back in about 2018, so I'm a newcomer. But I've been in the arts my whole life. I've been an actress since I was 18 and a writer since I was in my 20s. And just finding other ways to express myself, and painting came an important part in my life. So I was drawn to the exhibition, particularly by the words reconnect and reclaim. I've got two pieces in the exhibition. One is called The Race, and the other one is called The Party. The work that I do is very much based on an aesthetic that I'm really drawn to, which is a mid-20th century aesthetic. Coming out of the First and Second World Wars, there was the New York School, took a lead from the supremacists, and were using expression as a form of healing. And I'd had quite a bad bereavement, and I really identified with that. So and then looking at the supremacists and their coldness and their use of shapes and geometric art, I was wondering if there was a way I could combine those two aesthetics. And as I find the world quite complicated, I was very, very drawn to the idea of geometric shapes to express how I was feeling and what I was seeing around me, and how a mark can express an emotion, how a plane can support a theory or a thought. And so I read a lot about Kandinsky and his point to line to plane book, and got obsessed with triangles. So my work now is influenced by what I'm feeling on the day, automatic painting, where I just let emotions flow through me, and then I might make some kind of formation with geometric shapes around that emotion, which then might begin a narrative. And then the narrative for me can become a title. Sometimes my work is untitled, and sometimes I feel like I'm really getting into a groove of talking about very large subjects, like the political climate we're in at the moment, the kind of malaise that we feel in the world at the moment. And I'm really glad I found a channel to express these things. And then somebody might come along and go, oh, that really reminds me of my auntie, or that really reminds me of when I split up from my boyfriend. So they're very accessible pieces, even though they might have a lot of aesthetic and artistic history behind them. My father is from Sierra Leone, and he didn't talk much about his heritage, and I think a lot of first-generation African parents perhaps were quite reserved and felt very strongly about the Commonwealth, and that the British Empire was something that they were very much part of. So then growing up in the 70s in an all-white school, being the only black child, I didn't have a sense of either my African heritage and why I was so different to everyone else, or why I was told I was so different to everyone else. So there's a real sense of otherness as well in my work, of isolation, of frustration, of trauma, I think inherited trauma, because we hear a lot about. It wasn't until my kind of midlife when I went to Ghana and I worked in a refugee camp and I went to the slave ports in Ghana and realised that even though my father had come to England on the ticket of the British Empire passport, his name was Johnson and my name is Johnson. And when I was in those slave ports, I thought, of course, I'm more of a slave than anyone with an African name because Johnson's owned me at some point. And I think we're so disconnected at the moment. We are so, particularly after COVID and lockdown and tribal in our thinking. Kent can be a very tribal place because it's been invaded by so many different countries over the centuries. And I think all I'm looking for now in my mid-age is peace and connection. And if someone can look at my work and feel they're not alone and feel that someone has understood them, it may not have been my intention to understand them, but that doesn't matter because the ownership of the work is for the viewer, not for me. As soon as it's on a wall, it doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to each person who looks at it. So I think their connection to it is what's important, whether it talks to them culturally, whether it talks to them because of mental health issues, whether it talks to them politically. It doesn't matter. There was a little girl, my most proud moment during the exhibition. I walked in and I saw a little mixed race girl and she was drawing on a notepad and she was drawing my pictures, drawing the shapes. And I sat down next to her, got permission from Dad, sat down next to her and just chatted to her about what she could do with those shapes. She could move them around, she could colour them in and what did she think. And that was the best moment for the exhibition for me, is that a young person had taken the time to really look and connect with it.